Welcome to AP Environmental Science. In this video, we are going to talk about trophic levels, so the levels within a food chain, and the 10% rule of energy transfer between those trophic levels. Now, this corresponds to Module 6 in your textbook, and it is information that you probably have heard before in past science classes, particularly in introductory biology classes. So remember, we've had this same slide here in all of our biogeochemical cycles video lectures. Energy, which we're talking about in this video, it flows through the trophic levels and is eventually lost as heat to the environment. Matter, or anything that's not energy, that's actually recycled through the biosphere using those biogeochemical cycles. So energy flows through the trophic levels, lost as heat. Everything else is recycled. Make sure you understand that energy is not recycled, matter is. So a trophic level is the role that an organism plays in a food chain. And this should be a review for you. So producers, remember those are plants or autotrophs. Auto means self, troph is just talking about how it makes its own food or makes its own energy. Primary consumers, these are things like herbivores, so things that eat only plants. Secondary consumers, these are typically omnivores or sometimes they're carnivores. Really anything that's eating the primary consumer is a secondary consumer. And a tertiary consumer is a top carnivore, so anything that's eating the secondary consumer. Now, I want to note that an individual organism might not always fall under the same trophic level in every food chain. So take a mouse, for example. Mice or a mouse is a omnivore. So sometimes it eats plants, sometimes it eats other things like insects. Now, if a mouse is eating plants, that would put it as a primary consumer in that particular food chain. But if that same individual mouse is eating an insect, that means that that insect was eating a plant, so that puts the mouse as a secondary consumer. So just keep a mental note going that individuals do not always fall under the same exact category. It really depends on what the food chain is that you're looking at. So again, energy flows in one direction through the ecosystem. It starts with the sun, and then it goes to producers. Producers use it during primary productivity to add biomass to their tissues, and in the process do cellular respiration, and some of that energy is lost as heat. That is the black lines in this diagram, not the gray ones. Then the producers are then eaten by consumers, so we have that black line showing that energy transfer. The consumers do normalize processes, they do cellular respiration, and again lose some of that energy as heat. And eventually, when those organisms die and decompose, the decomposers, or the organisms that help break down the tissues of the once living consumer, they are able to obtain a little bit of energy from that process. And again, they do cellular respiration and lose a little bit of energy as heat. Now, those gray lines that circle from decomposers to the nutrient pool back to producers, that is not looking at energy. That is looking at matter. So remember, matter or nutrients, those are recycled and they loop through here. Energy is eventually lost as heat. Energy is not recycled. The 10% rule is talking about how much energy actually moves from one trophic level to the next. So if we look at all of the energy that is available that producers are able to convert into their biomass. So we're looking at how much primary productivity happened and what energy is really there in our starting level. So we call that 100%. Of all of the energy that's available for producers, only about 10% is actually transferred to your primary consumers. The rest of it, so 90% of the energy, is actually lost as heat due to cellular respiration at some point during that plant's life cycle. Now, of that energy that is at the primary consumer level, again, only 10% moves to the next level. So our secondary consumers, they actually only have 1% of the energy that was available for our producers. So because we're losing so much energy at each energy transfer level, that means that there's not a whole heck of a lot of energy available at the top level of the food chain. So in summary, all ecosystems depend on this continuous flow of energy from the sun, and this enables organisms to transfer matter or nutrients through biogeochemical cycles. Now, I will make a brief side note. Organisms that live at the bottom of the ocean where they don't have sunlight, they go through this process called chemosynthesis to convert energy from those chemicals to do their life processes, but that's totally separate. We're kind of ignoring that right now. So that energy, it flows from the sun to producers, then to consumers, and it moves up through the trophic levels. And each time energy is transferred, it actually becomes less useful. This is discussed pretty thoroughly in the laws of thermodynamics, and you should have learned about those in your past chemistry classes. And again, only about 10% of the energy is moved from one trophic level to the next. The rest, so about 90%, is actually just lost in that whole process. Now again, this was a fair amount of information and I did go pretty quick. Make sure to rewatch any sections of the video that you need to look back on to have complete sets of notes. Please send me any questions that you have and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. And I hope that as you watch this video, you were able to learn something.